It's been a year since Bollywood actor Sushant Rajput was found dead on this very day. The last 1 year, we've seen so many twists and turns regarding his case. So many controversies, so many conspiracy theories, so much of politics, so much of mudslinging. Everybody, in their own way, trying to cash in on this tragedy. But there was a larger call from his family, from his friends and fans, as they sought justice for Sushant. That has not gone anywhere in the past 1 year. We still don't know why Sushant committed suicide, or if he didn't commit suicide, what happened, how was he found dead, if there was a murder angle. Lots of theories around it, little facts even a year later to sustain any of those theories. It was the Mumbai police, remember, which first filed the accidental death report. The Mumbai police went to all over the town, calling whichever celebrity they felt like to investigate this so-called case. But they never went beyond suicide or pressure from the industry as a cause for abetment to suicide. What happened to that case? Well, it was transferred to the CBI. There was another FIR that got filed against Rhea and others in Bihar for probe of abetment to suicide. What's the status of it? That was also transferred for the CBI. Then came along the Enforcement Directorate. The Enforcement Directorate filed a case based on the Patna FIR, where the family claimed that there was some money angle and money had gone missing. And so the Enforcement Directorate decided to take it upon themselves to look into the claims of 15 crores that had allegedly gone missing or siphoned off from Sushant's account. No headway there. They haven't found anything a year later. Then came the Narcotics Control Bureau with over 35 arrests and a case about drugs being bought and sold. They said they've even seized a high quantity of drug and cash. A 12,000-page charge sheet was filed. Honestly speaking, perhaps the only development that has happened has been in this agency's probe. The main key agency that is supposed to look in all of these allegations of foul play and murder was the CBI. They filed an FIR against Rhea and others on August 6th after much controversy. There is no charge sheet. We don't know if they found anything big or significant. There hasn't been any such claim. We do know that there was an AIMS report that emerged, a detailed forensic report that also said that they did not find any evidence of foul play. So tonight, as many remember their favorite actor, as many remember their friend, their partner, many remember their loved family member. Let's ask, what happened in this past 1 year? Is the case dead? Does anybody in the investigative agencies really care about finding out the truth? Was there anything to it beyond a suicide? Joining me right now, Mr. Vikas Singh, former ASG and a lawyer for representing the Sushant's family in this case. Sanjay Hegde, senior advocate with the Supreme Court. Swapnil Kothari, senior lawyer, managing partner for Kothari and Company. Madhavan Narayanan, senior journalist, and Emil Sharma, former CBI special director, also joining us. Mr. Vikas Singh, I want to come across to you first. If you can give us an update on, has the CBI given any details, a status update on what's happening to this case? A year down the line, there is still no sign of a charge sheet.
Well, if there was a suicide to be accepted by the CBI, then abetment to suicide was definitely a charge sheet to be filed, because abetment to suicide is something which is very subjective, which is, the family has already made out a case of how Rhea isolated Sushant and, alienated him from the family, controlled his entire, inner circle, removed the servants, controlled his medication, didn't tell the family about what all medicines he was having. So if they had to really, go for abetment to suicide, they have everything, with them to to straight away file a charge sheet for abetment to suicide. But I think they are looking at the murder angle, and that is why the delay, because they want something concrete to file a charge sheet for murder. Because if you recall the Arushi Talwar case, it's only because of the the fact they wanted to hurriedly give a closure to the matter, that the real culprits went scot-free and the parents were charge sheeted, and then they went to trial and ultimately got acquitted by the High Court. So I'm happy that they are not doing something hurriedly, because if you will recall the family's cases of abetment to suicide, but if there is a murder angle, then they must investigate that angle and take it to the only to its logical end. But only one I have a one grievance, or I would say I feel that the matter is not going, as far as murder is concerned, in the right direction. That so far CBI has not taken a single person for custodial interrogation. Now, definitely, if the people who were at the house could have been taken into custody, Rhea could have been taken into custody to understand what exactly was the larger plot, if at all there was. And even for the abetment to suicide, these people were necessarily to be taken in custody. So, either which way, they should have been taken into custody, and that would have definitely helped in expediting the case. Initially, I was told that they were not taking in custody, because in the remand application they had to take a call whether it is suicide or whether it is abetment to suicide or it is murder. And on that technicality, the CBI was not asking for a remand. According to me, that technicality should not have prevented them from taking somebody on remand, because you can always say that it is abetment to suicide stroke murder and ask for a remand and say that we are examining both these angles and want to take somebody in custody. So that according to me may be delaying this case so far, or maybe they are getting some electronic evidence, or they have some evidence already which they are looking at more closely. So I really, today we are all groping in the dark, because we really can't say what CBI is up to. Because if they had to close it as a mere suicide, not even abetment to suicide, then that should not have taken so long. That could have been done much faster. So there is some angle to it which they are probing, and that is why the delay. So according to me, the family is quite hopeful that something may come out. The family also feels that he will get justice, because if you recall, CBI was the demand of the family. So he
Yeah.
initially went to Patna, and then Patna, after that, Bihar government sent
But
to
Mr. Singh,
CBI.
let
We
me
also
ask you
wanted
this.
CBI.
Isn't there a time limit to for filing the charge sheet? And if you do go beyond that, aren't you supposed to give a valid reason for why you don't have all the facts with you right now? So what does the CBI have to say? Why don't they have the facts? Why can't they still attempt to take anybody in custody if they think that's where they've gone wrong?
Well, according to me, there is no legal timeline prescribed for filing a charge sheet. So that is something which is a grey area. There was a few judgments of the Supreme Court which said that charge sheet should be filed in a particular time frame, but later on they reviewed that judgment and said that no, that time frame cannot be sort of prescribed for filing charge sheet. So as far as the legal position is concerned, there is no time limit. And if the CBI wants to take another couple of months to decide when to file a charge sheet, they can very well do so. So that is a lacuna in the law, or I would say that is a liberty to the investigating agency to investigate a case completely thoroughly. Because if there had been a time limit, then probably they would have to hurriedly file a charge sheet.
Okay.
That time limit of filing a charge sheet applies only if you have taken somebody in custody, and if he has to be given default bail. Only for that limited purpose there is a time limit for filing a charge sheet.
Okay.
So
All
that
right.
has not happened in this case. So there is no question of. Thank you,
All
Tanvi.
right. Thank you so much, Mr. Vikas Singh, for joining us. Mr. Sanjay Hegde, do you want to come in here on this aspect that, well, if they had enough evidence, on suicide and abetment or suicide charge, they would have brought in by now. Perhaps they are still looking and have some leads on the murder aspect, which is why no charge sheet has come through yet.
Well, I do not want to speculate. And half the problem in this case has been unwarranted speculation from all kinds of quarters. Please look at the facts. When he died, Did the family even say, look, he was being treated for depression? They concealed it. Did the family even come back and say that we knew he was suffering from depression? One of the sisters actually consulted a doctor in Delhi, and some drugs were prescribed, which the man took. There was entirely a perfect storm of politics, opportunism, and unwarranted charges, all flying all over the place. What has happened in this case is that there was a DGP of Bihar who very conveniently, after getting all this publicity in this case, tried for a MLA ticket, and thankfully he did not get it. You also had so many people going on with so many unsolicited theories about the government of Maharashtra and some involvement there. This was used as a campaign to bring down a lot of people in Bollywood on unwarranted claims. There was a very, very serious conversation that ought to have taken place, and which is all the more relevant in these times of pandemic. That is about depression. People need to talk to people. People need to understand depression as a mental health issue, which has to be carefully handled. Instead of all that, we have this perfect circus, and there has been a murder. I agree. There has been a murder of common sense. That is what has happened in this case. And today is the first anniversary. I think it is time that the CBI is called upon to take a final call. Was the death suicidal, or do you have any evidence of homicide? There doesn't appear to be. If it is suicidal, then does it come within an abetment? Who abetted it? Who said you go and commit suicide? Who instigated the man? You may do a lot of things, but it does not necessarily amount to abetment to suicide, as the Arnab Goswami case also shows. So this is just a perfect, to use the Shashi Tharoor phrase, farrago of all kinds of imaginations, all kinds of novel ideas, and we go on and on.
Yes, but Mr. Hegde, while you are completely right about the circus that went on, we have to keep in mind, what did it cost us? What did it cost us? Not just for a family that perhaps got false hope or of finding something more to be able to explain to themselves why their son was not alive. The cost of a girl and her family that went through so much of trauma, was hounded day in, day out, with questions of somebody who herself has had a struggle with her own mental health and then was further pushed into this. And we didn't still acknowledge that. One big takeaway for me personally was that this country doesn't understand depression. This country doesn't understand mental health, neither do we want to. We can sit here and analyze somebody smiling or looking sad and thereby take a call on their mental health. That is our limited understanding of it. All of what happened in those few months came at a cost of these important aspects. Swapnil Kothari, it was very clear when the FSL lab report came, when the toxicology lab report came, when details of the postmortem came, when AIMS report came, at no point did an official report, scientific investigation report, show us any evidence of foul play.
Tanvi, all the reports that you've mentioned, they are often there in criminal cases, and they are debunked at the very first juncture or upon a particular show or corroboration of evidence. So I would not hinge too much upon a particular report or a set of reports. To take a contrarian view as far as this particular case is concerned, as Mr. Vikas Singh pointed out, in my opinion, if it was a case of simple suicide, CBI should have closed it long ago. If it was a case of abetment to suicide, CBI should have closed this case, I think, a couple of months ago, if I may say so. But I think if they're examining the angle of murder, and nothing should stop them from examining that angle. And as they have said today, that nothing is ruled out, and this is what we have to say, and they want to remain tight-lipped about it. That's fine. That's up to them. But I'll give you another view also thereafter. As far as the CBI's interrogation or investigation into this matter is concerned, Tanvi, there is one thing that I will agree with you. ED and the drugs case, that is the Enforcement Directorate and the NCB. NCB is the only one that has developed something. I don't know if there is any strategy behind it, but I think those two cases seem to have gone a little bit, astray in that sense. I don't think that, they've taken a departure from the main case. The main case is that of CBI, and I completely agree with Mr. Vikas saying that if you want to really come to a conclusion either way, then I think you need to bring in people into remand. So that, what happens here, Tanvi, is that when you bring some people into custody, then you are duty bound also then to file a charge sheet, as you rightly pointed out. Isn't there a time limit to that? So somehow they don't want to tie themselves up with that. I don't know why, if there is any political interference, if there is anything of that nature, I do not know. I'm not in a position to sit here and speculate on that. But there is one thing that I will say about this thing, that CBI, that in my opinion, Vikas Singh, if there is a family's lawyer, then I think you should go to the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court ordered the CBI investigation, and say that, you please direct the CBI or call them up at least and ask them as to where they stand and how much time they're going to take. Because investigations cannot go on ad nauseum. You cannot keep debating this. Maybe there'll be a second anniversary to this and we'll be still sitting and debating. I would rather prefer that if there is something that you don't want to come out with, then you say that it's a suicide, or you say it's an abetment to suicide, or whatever you want to say, and shut the case. And do not really give any rays of hope, as you rightly pointed out, to anybody. And, we'll all forget it as, as the questions that we often ask ourselves. Do aliens exist? Does God exist? If God existed, if God didn't exist, then how is it that Milarepa, a monk, climbed the Kailash Mansar over 1,000 years ago only, and nobody has been able to
No, Mr.
climb
Kothari,
that
I'm
ever?
sorry. This is not one of those existential questions or
No, it's not the
existential
existential
thoughts
question.
or stories to be
This is
discussed.
not existential.
It's all
I'm not being
fact-based.
existential.
The facts and information have always been there in front of us. We've just
Right, but
chosen
that's how you
his
look at it.
his friends, his
It's a
so-called
question of
friends, his
interpretation.
so-called friends have used this for their own publicity. His family has been misled. Politicians used it for their own benefit, and media used it for its own benefit. That's as plain and simple. Anybody else
Tanvi, that's
who
your
was part of
interpretation.
this
People
entire
are allowed
debate
to have
was doing it for
interpretations,
their
and
own
any lawyer-
visibility.
No, any lawyer, Tanvi, you are entitled to your viewpoint, but any lawyer who will look at it in a particular way will always have his set of interpretation, as Mr. Hegde had, or as Mr. Vikas Singh had, or as I have, or as
No,
any
so you
somebody
and I
else who
can
might
debate
come
the
and
legal
should-
aspects of it, Mr.
Absolutely.
Kothari, but
So
please
that's exactly what I'm trying to say.
don't akin
It's not a
this to
question of
any
aggression.
bizarre
It's not-
conspiracy
no.
about aliens or even to have a debate
All I'm
about
trying to
existence
say
of God.
No, you've taken it. No, you've taken it in a wrong way. All I'm trying to say is that there are certain questions which will remain unanswered, and it's not the murder of common sense, but it's a non-application of common sense that has unfortunately happened. So, this is something which I will always have a debate about, and, I will completely agree for anybody to have a view, but on strictly going by the law.
Yes, so strictly going by the law, that's a different thing. We don't
CBI
have...
should call for it. CBI should come out with a theory one way or the other, because there is enough now. 1 year has passed, and I think people have, there's a time that you put an end to a certain case one way or the other, and, let's go ahead with it.
I have two more panelists to go. Mr.
Sure.
Hegde, if you could just give me a couple of minutes. Let me just bring in Madhavan Narayanan. He wanted to make a point as well to what Swapnil Kothari was saying.
No, actually, I'm not here to discuss the specifics of the case as much, because we've had excellent coverage by media groups from various points of view, including largely imaginative ones. But my point here is to look at the political, media, and social dimensions of the issue without going into it, the details. Two things to begin with. One is that Sanjay Hegde used the word farrago, invoking Shashi Tharoor's vocabulary, and I'm here to compete with him. There is another word in the English language dictionary called flossy nosy nihili pilification, which very interestingly, the meaning of this word is the action or habit of estimating something as worthless. So I'm just wondering if the CBI is actually indulging in flossy nosy nihili pilification. I might have some circumstantial evidence to that point, because if the matter is serious enough for the national media to go in shrill tones and for the Supreme Court to step in, for the CBI not to file a regular charge sheet or to even examine, as Vikas Singh very rightly says, even a custodial inquiry means that
Correct.
the non-action itself is points the needle of suspicion towards the CBI itself, as you
Correct.
know, like the dog that did not bark in the Sherlock Holmes story. I want to know if the non-action by CBI can be construed as deliberate delay with motive, which might be political in the context. And I'm surprised we have discussed this issue for 20 minutes without mentioning the unofficial chief public prosecutor of India, who goes by the name of Kangana Ranaut. So she was there, and there's a whole cult following of Sushant Singh Rajput, who I have personally, when everybody was not lauding his acting skills, I wrote an Outlook review of his own Chidiya and Outlook. And all the people who defended him after his death had probably not even seen the movie, which is very symbolic of what is happening in India. Now, Sushant Singh Rajput first became a small town icon, and for a whole generation, from a social psychology point of view, he became somebody very important because they felt some kind of a wrong had been done to him. But the evidence suggests that he is certainly in some way connected with some kind of a use of drug, maybe a soft drug, whatever. But to suddenly build non-tenable cases of various kinds of conspiracy theories and throw it disproportionately on the national media with taking sides and social media being on fire on this shows that this is not really a criminal case as one might see. There
Correct.
is a strong social, psychological, and political element to this. And the stepping in of the CBI and Supreme Court, which in the case of vaccination policies might take months, happened with Godspeed in the case of Sushant Singh Rajput, which anyway is could be maybe the English phrase unseemly haste was invented for this or such occasions. So there has been a lot of politicization and there's been a lot of irresponsibility on the part of media which cannot tell the difference between guesswork, conjecture, circumstantial evidence, plausibility. All these words exist in the English language, which my worthy lawyer friends will know more about. But I can tell you that there has been, at the end of it all, nothing but flossy, nosy, nihilipilification.
Well,
So,
at the end of the day, and why I'm having this conversation today is because I want to point out and remind people that all that you heard being discussed, debated, speculated, as Sanjay Hegde rightly said, has not fructified into anything concrete even 1 year later. This needs to be a lesson for everybody who tracked that story. Mr. Emal Sharma, good evening to you and thank you for joining us. Mr. Sharma, does this argument, make do you agree with this argument that the CBI probably hasn't filed a charge sheet in amendment of suicide yet? If they had the evidence, they would have on suicide and amendment to suicide, but they don't. They are probably still looking at the murder angle and have some leads there, which is why the charge sheet hasn't come through.
See, Tanviji, there are two aspects to this case. One is the time frame of completion of investigation, and second is the outcome of investigation. As far as the time frame of completion of investigation is concerned, 1 year has already gone by, and it's everybody's concern that CBI should come out official finding. So I presume that the entire field work was done. No, I believe that entire field work was done in first 2.5 months, and nothing more is being done as far as collection of evidence is concerned, going by the newspaper reports. I have no inside information. So now they must be assessing the evidence legally and administratively. There are layers and layers of investigators and supervisors and also lawyers attached to the CBI who give their opinion. So they must be in the process of doing it. But as one, it is my concern as much as yours that they should come out with the authentic findings of the matter. Now, as far as the outcome of investigation is concerned, now knowledgeable people knew right at the word go what it is. And frankly, I used to tell my friends, but I am not going to disclose my opinion at this stage. Let the CBI come out with its opinion in the matter, whether it's murder or it's attempt to suicide. But one thing is very clear. The case will be decided on the basis of science. It's an overhyped case. where, as earlier speakers have said, uh, politics came in, mass media came in, courts, even the court, the highest level came in, and so on and so forth. Now, that was much ado about nothing. As far as science goes, newspaper reports indicate that the team constituted by the All India Institute of Medical Sciences said that it's a case of, it's not murder, uh, if I have read the newspapers correctly. So the case basically would be decided by the findings of the second post-mortem report. We don't know the exact finding, but this is, I'm saying what I'm saying on the basis of newspaper reports. As far as the first post-mortem report is concerned, we all know that categorically said that it's not a case of murder. Now, as far as, and it's a case of suicide. Now, as far as abetment to suicide is concerned, now, one can't say, it all depends on the attendant circumstances, the people around him and all. So let's wait for another 2-3 months.
So let me ask you this question before I take it back to our panelists, Mr. ML Sharma. They took over the case in August. By October, the AIMS forensic report had come in, where the AIMS forensic board chief himself initially was hinting at foul play, but by the time they did their scientific investigation and came out with the report, he said, well, it was suicide, there is no other evidence to suggest foul play. Even as late as December, the CBI kept saying, no, we are doing, a thorough investigation and all angles are being looked into. No aspect has been ruled out. The argument that Vikas Singh was making, Sushant Singh family lawyer was making to us, is that they never took the key accused custody. They should have done custodial interrogation. Is the fact that CBI didn't take custodial did not do that because they feared that once they took her in the custody and she got bail, it would seem as if there is no case and that there would be a massive political controversy over it. Does it sound political to you, CBI's actions in the way they investigated this case? Is it also political?
So now, the family lawyer is a very senior lawyer, and he's also very senior office holder of the Lawyers Association. He is entitled to his views, but he should carefully go through Section 41, which prohibits indiscriminate arrests. Please remember, arrest is to be made only when the investigating agency is convinced that prima facie he is involved in a particular crime. Perhaps the investigating agency didn't find any circumstances pointing towards that direction, and therefore nobody was taken into custody. Now, anybody's wish that somebody should be taken into custody and only then investigation can be taken to its logical conclusion is not scientific. It's not a correct approach.
Okay. Both our panelists want to make points. So, Swapnil Kothali, to you first on this aspect, and then we'll bring in Mr. Madhavan.
Tanvi, just to point out, as far as the aspect of bail that you pointed out, that maybe, X person would get bail or Y person would get bail, so let's not arrest. Let me tell you, bail is the rule and jail is the exception. So you can call a person in, you can keep that person into custody, ask questions. Eventually, that person will apply for bail, the person will get bail, and then, as and when the trial comes, the trial is conducted, and then if the person is found to be guilty, the person who was out on bail will obviously be convicted and sentenced or fined, whatever it is. That is the way the Criminal Procedure Code works and the Indian Penal Code works. The second point is that oftentimes, people to conduct an investigation, it's not the question of anybody's wish. It is the question of the way the CRPC and the IPC work and the evidence also work. These three are the triumvirate of the criminal laws. So you have to go by them. If you feel, yes, there is one point that the former additional CBI made, that if you don't find any incriminating evidence, or if you feel at the first blush of it or even thereafter that there is no X person is not involved or Y person is not involved, then don't call it that person, don't arrest that person. But to me, in this kind of a case, when there were so many loopholes, where there were so many angles which point in a particular way, to completely not call anybody in for investigation and to then let there be a drug angle and the enforcement directorate angle is a little bit too harsh, a little bit too outlandish for me to believe. That's the reason why I facetiously pointed out some existential points to you. You may find them funny, but that's okay.
No,
But
so tell me why
so the point is that
why didn't the CBI that was brought in at the after the orders from the Supreme Court, the CBI that was brought in because the whole country seemed at that point of time wanting to know who murdered Sushant Singh Rajput, the CBI that was brought in because his family repeatedly insisted, the CBI that was brought in because the Bihar government pushed for it, the CBI that was brought in because the BJP, the ruling party in the center and in many other states, wanted it to come in and investigate this. When all of these people wanted justice for Sushant, why didn't the CBI take any do any custodial interrogation?
That's a very good question, Tanvi. And we can all wish something, but ultimately it was the decision of the Supreme Court based on the facts of the case that CBI and independent investigation agency has to come in. So now, to give a very appropriate answer to this, it is for the Supreme Court and the family to press before the Supreme Court that please call the CBI. 1 year is a tad too much, or should I say from August till now, whatever the amount of months, that is 9 months, 10 months, whatever it is. And then if you are going in a certain direction, you have to give an answer. And if you don't have an answer, if you don't have enough evidence, then file a case of closure or say it's abetment to suicide, say it's suicide. But please close on this one way or the other, because there are people involved, there are families involved, as you rightly pointed out, and that is the way one has to look at it. And one can always keep on saying that whether a God exists or whether aliens exist or not, and there is enough evidence to that. But we don't want to go into those things. We only want to say very, very, very crisply legally that if you cannot come to a conclusion, whether it is because of your political interference, because you have not been able to find anything, assuming that you have been given a complete clean way into looking at it, then say that, come out and say, it doesn't matter if you disappoint billions of people, तो नहीं है, हमारे पास evidence, तो क्या फर्क पड़ता है? What is there? If we don't have enough evidence
I suspect, Mr. Kothari, it's not about disappointing millions of people more than it is about the embarrassment that will come through for many of those who at that time indulge into grandstanding. Yes,
you
yes.
have to do justice.
Mr. Madhavan, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Tanvi, the point is both Mr. Sharma and Mr. Kothari have made fairly valid points. First point is that science has to play the role here. Second is the process. But as a media person, I can tell you that from a social point of view, when we study plausibility, then the gaps in procedure, the visible gaps are extremely important to understand the public nature of the issue. Now, on the one hand, there has been an unseemly haste in CBI stepping into the matter, and then there is Enforcement Directorate, and then there is the Narcotics Bureau. So everybody is after this case. So after the unseemly haste, there is an unseemly delay. So which only makes us conclude that there is something beyond a normal criminal investigation happening in this case. And I want to point out right now to the Bollywood divide, which was at the heart of some of these issues. See, the Bollywood as an industry itself has been divided politically ever since Mr. Modi came to power. Let us not beat around the bush. There has been a certain politicization of Bollywood, and it reflected in the way this case was discussed, reported in the media, and made into in what, in my opinion, is an issue larger than it should have been. This is not to say there should be no investigation, but to equate an occasional drug user with a drug mafia, taking a map to Dubai and painting all sorts of fictional pictures, to me is not a rational prima facie case. It is a conspiracy theory. And therefore, the moment you bring in these theories, CBI's role as a process-driven, science-driven agency becomes very suspect, because, there is a saying in English that people that if you torture the data enough, it will tough out what you want. But I'm afraid CBI cannot be tortured like that. It's all said and done is an institution. All said and done, it has processes. All said and done, it has got documentation. And any gaps in documentation, when it lands up in court, will only explode on the credibility of the organization. And my belief is that the CBI officers know it deep down. But I also guess that discretion is the better part of institutional valor, and they might have just decided to sit on the files rather than, on the one hand, displease political lobbies, on the other hand, shut the matter altogether and embarrass those very lobbies. So they are caught between a rock and a hard place. and this might explain the inordinate delay in either carrying out custodial investigations. And one more point, we haven't mentioned Rhea Chakraborty. The poor girl seems to have been harassed out
Yeah.
of proportion and painted into some kind of a Nagin from some or some Hindi soap opera. And we need to examine whether we as a civilized society deserve to do this or should be doing this. So that aspect of fair play, because we are now not just discussing technical details of unnatural death, but we are also discussing how everything is being made to hang out in not only in front of mainstream media, but this completely unruly creature called social media, in which propaganda machines play a huge role. In fact, disrupting the mainstream media in a negative way, because few in the mainstream media have the patience to sift out facts anymore, or the need to do. So all this has to be borne in mind. So my own feeling is that if the CBI doesn't come out with any meaningful conclusion in the next month or so, it would only worsen matters.
But
Perhaps it
do-
is better to, I mean, just imagine ED and Narcotics Bureau. You've set a whole pack of wolves on this case.
yeah.
Does it deserve that much?
Yeah,
No.
and nobody's found anything except for the fact that some of them consumed a few drugs and bought it for each other's, for their own friends and their circles that they hung out in. Now, if that is the really the definition of the large-scale halls and crackdowns that the Narcotics Control Bureau of our country should be doing, when there an entire act that has been given to you on crackdown on drugs, then God help us. The Enforcement Directorate in a year, an Enforcement Directorate that's supposed to investigate the topmost economic criminals of our country and how they, move around their money, how they hide the money and launder the money. And if the investment directorate has not been able to find anything in 1 year, I think it's pretty clear of where we are headed. The third and the most important aspect, and Mr. ML Sharma, I'll come back to you, is the CBI and what they may have found or haven't found. Again, I insist on the timeline aspect because, like Madhavan pointed out, there are also other lives at stake and their mental peace at stake. Rhea Chakraborty can only move on if the CBI is able to, provide evidence in one way or the other. Mr. Sharma.
Correct.
I can't agree with you more. Rhea Chakraborty, yes, but there are many others who has been caught in the loop. You see, if they're innocent, they should be rehabilitated in the society. इसको बोलते हैं हिंदी में सुरखरू होना चाहिए. तो बहुत ज़रूरी, it's very necessary that another couple of months the case is decided on the basis of scientific evidence and other collateral circumstances. Yes, sure, it's concern of yours, and equally it's concern of everyone else who is interested in the civil society's well-being.
Yes, Swapnil Kothari and Madhavan, I just wanted to point out before I go to Swapnil that I did raise this point. In fact, one of the first things that I highlighted in this conversation was, at the cost of what? All that circus, as Sanjay Hegde was calling it, was at the cost of what? And one very important fallout was the agony that Rhea Chakraborty and her family went through, of days and days of being hounded, names being called, character assassination left, right and center that was done for that girl without anything being brought forward apart from the fact that Sushant's family wasn't on board with the relationship that Sushant and Rhea had, and Sushant probably went ahead with what Rhea thought should be the way of handling things than his family did. That's about it. Swapnil Kothari, yes, you wanted to make a point.
Yeah, just Mr. Madhavan, one point that I would like to point out is that there was no unseemly haste in appointing the CBI because the matter was there before the Supreme Court. All the parties got a chance to give their say, and that was one way or the other that the Supreme Court had to come to a conclusion. And the Supreme Court came to a conclusion that CBI needs to be appointed. Now, as far as the point that Tanvi tried to make out, yes, there is an unseemly delay. That I agree with you fully and completely. Now, as far as the very point that Tanvi tried to make out is, which is absolutely correct, and I completely agree with her, is that one way or the other, regardless, Tanvi, CBI is a professional agency, it has lost many battles. It has won many battles. So it's a very professional agency. In this, yes, of course, there was too much of the country and the world spotlight on this particular case. Whether it was justified, unjustified is a separate issue, and one can debate one way or the other. The second point is, the point here is that they will have to come out, and they should come out with a conclusion. And Mr. Vikas Singh, for all you know, should be insisting on that you please come out and give it a closure one way or the other, so that, as you rightly pointed out, that people who are involved in this case or people who have been hounded in a particular way can decide whether, whether to move on with their life or whether to then continue with their defense or whatever it is. So that is the way I believe that is the way the case. And I will, for once, if I was in Mr. Vikas Singh's place, I would have definitely gone to the Supreme Court and said that please give a timeline to this. It has to be 1 month at best, and otherwise let's forget about it. There cannot be any second anniversary of this where Tanvi and I debate about existential crisis.
No,
Right.
absolutely not. I think the issue got dragged on way too long. Even back then, there were all kinds of debates and speculations, and I would not want to do that again. I don't even want the valuable times of agencies to be wasted or that of our
Correct.
courts. If they
Right,
can't find
right.
anything, admit it and move on. Yes, Mr.
Yes.
Madhavan.
Yeah, I just want to say something very tangential. Sushant Singh Rajput was a fascinating character, a qualified engineer who was interested in quantum physics.
Yeah.
He's one of the finest characters, personalities that Bollywood has produced. Artistically good at dancing, but with a personal interest in astrophysics. We should be celebrating the life he led and how he could have been a bigger icon than he's been made out to be. He's much more than a murder victim. He's very aspirational in the sense of what a great Indian mind can be, and such minds should not be allowed to die. I mean, I'm taking a slightly romantic line on this, I'm afraid. I'm not discussing crime, foul, and murder. But I think it's a point to make that we as a society have to be a bit more civilized in what we do. We've got to raise our standards. What the Sushant Singh case has shown us is the underbelly of the Indian mind. I'm sorry to say this. We have to be a little bit more classy than this if we have to be called a Vishwa Guru.
No, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you, and that perhaps needs to be one of our big takeaways from how we reacted, handled this case. I mean, I remember everywhere I went and I met people, so many of them were so seriously convinced of those bizarre conspiracy theories that were doing the rounds, that were being explained on various other channels. And it was so difficult to just simply put this one line in front of people to say, there is no evidence. You asked me to tell you what happened. I can only say I don't know, but neither does anybody else, because there is no evidence. Now, the CBI needs to come out and put it to rest by telling us, is there evidence or not of abetment of suicide or murder? And if not, please put it out there clearly. The rest of the takeaways of what happened, Madhavan put it very correctly and in a very articulate manner, so I'm going to leave it at that. Big thank you to all of the panelists who've joined us on this conversation. Viewers, just reiterating that 1 year on, the CBI has not filed this charge sheet, not found any evidence to suggest murder or a conspiracy to get rid of Sushant Singh Rajput. A year down the line, the Enforcement Directorate has not found any evidence that Rhea Chakraborty or anybody else stole money or siphoned off money from Sushant Singh Rajput, 15 crores at that. 1 year down the line, it's only the Narcotics Control Bureau that has managed to file a charge sheet. And the NCB case didn't even have anything to do with this so-called murder of Sushant Singh Rajput. We've done a great disservice to this man. We've done a great disservice to a very, very intelligent, qualified engineer who became an actor and won so many hearts in this country. We did a disservice to his memory by running with that circus. The least we can do now is to only remember him for what he did and who he was, and perhaps do talk about a lot more about mental health and how it can impact any of us, no matter who we are. Thank you for joining us on this conversation.